Hello, 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 hello. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's episode of The Traverse, Rights and Democracies Institute monthly conversation series, where we explore the ideas and the issues that make up our movement as we talk with the people who are putting them into action. I'm Kaya Morris. I'm the executive director for the Rights and Democracy Institute, or RDI for short, which works across Vermont and New Hampshire to advance human rights and a healthy, just, and equitable future for our communities. Through grassroots organizing, transformative policy work, and supporting the development of a new generation of leaders from rural communities, particularly those that have been most impacted by harmful policies, RDI is building power for a strong and inclusive multiracial democracy where everyone can thrive. I'm thrilled to be joined tonight for our 10th episode of this conversation series by two of the most incredible leaders in the work to disrupt hate and to keep digital spaces safe. We're going to explore how this work relates to building strong grassroots movements and winning a thriving and inclusive democracy. Our guests for tonight are Daryle Lamont Jenkins, founder of the One People's Project, which has played an instrumental role in causing the collapse of hate groups throughout the country, and Jessica Robinson, founder and CEO of PurePoint International, a holistic boutique security firm that is the #1 security firm for women-owned and women-led businesses globally. I'm also joined by my amazing colleague and co-host, Zoe Silverman, who's Rights and Democracy's data and tech manager. Now, we have all seen how throughout our country, targeted online hate is being used to stifle and silence people who are working to win a safer and more just democracy for all of us. We also know that women, people of color, people who identify as LGBTQ+, and other people who hold marginalized identities are targeted at significantly higher rates. This hate can come in many forms, and it can escalate rapidly, from doxxing to death threats to entering people's physical worlds. Now, as many listening may know, I have personally experienced the impacts of white supremacist hate during my time as a Vermont state representative, and ultimately stepped down from my role and then left the town of Bennington with my family after these threats became far too real. And through my story, which is documented in the recently released film Backlash: Misogyny in the Digital Age, it unfolded several years ago, but the state has done very little to address this issue since, and I continue to hear from current legislators about the horrific experiences that they are having. Now, at the same time, we're hearing from grassroots organizers in our movements about threats that they're experiencing close to home in their work for education, justice, and more. And with digital tech and online spaces becoming ever more omnipresent and central to our movement work, this conversation could not be more timely. Welcome, Daryle and Jessica. Thank you for being here tonight for us for this super important topic. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Same. Thank you for having us here today.
So to get our conversation started, Zoe, would you like to share a little bit about why this issue is close to your heart as well as before opening up our first question to Daryle and Jessica to get us started?
Sure. Thank you, Kaya. As someone who's Generation Z, I grew up on the internet. And so from a really young age, I was able to both see and engage with different forms of online hate, specifically in online activism groups, which I was a part of since I was like early in middle school. And for a while, it kind of felt like digital hate and harassment was something that was like unavoidable. It was just something that's going to happen to you. But I think now, and with the different changing landscape of digital hate and harassment, I really think it's something that can be combated. And I really am trying to shift this kind of like paradigm that like, it's just going to happen to you and there's nothing you can do about it, which is definitely something that I grew up thinking. And in like my professional life, I've been involved in both politics as well as kind of cybersecurity and computer science. And for a little bit, I didn't think there was any kind of real intersections between those two fields. I thought they were definitely very separate. But I quickly learned that there's a lot of intersection between the two, specifically in the realm of cybersecurity. And I really think that goes hand in hand with activism and how it's so vital to keep both the movement safe and specifically the people involved in movements safe. But to turn it back to Daryle and Jessica, I really want to thank you both so much for being here tonight. And to start out, could you both share a little bit about the work you both do as it relates to disrupting online hate and keeping digital movement spaces safe, and also what got you involved in the work?
Well, I can tell you, and first I want to say again, thank you guys for having us here today. It's funny when you ask me how we can start off by saying how I got started, because that plays right into all of this. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years. I have been involved with a curiosity of it ever since I was a kid about where did the white supremacists go after the civil rights era. And in the 80s, when I really started looking into it more, one of the things that I saw were those message boards, those computer message boards. I had a friend of mine while I was in the Air Force that had her own computer in her dorm room, and she used to go on these computer message boards, which was like the precursor to what we know today as the internet. And you can find them there. You can find White Aryan Resistance on these boards. You can find the Klan on these boards. You can find Aryan Nations on these boards. And they were talking back and forth. It's something that James Ridgway even brought up in his book, Blood in the Face, back in the day. That goes back to, I would say, about 1989, 1990. So I say that because it's important to recognize that in many respects, the white supremacist scene has the jump on us when it comes to the internet. You know, I cut to, say, 1996, 1995. That's when I started getting onto the internet for real. And the first things that I would go to were those white supremacist websites, the Klan websites and such, just to see what it is they're saying to each other before it just blows up for everybody, you know. And the first neo-Nazi website, the first hate website, was a website called stormfront.org. It's still in existence, still there, and it's probably at one time it was one of the largest ones, but now that the scene has exploded into other directions, it's just, you know, more or less it's still there, but it's not as traveled as, say, any other page that you will find online today. So that's where I would get a lot of my information. I used to get my information from other websites in the early days, like Resistance Records. That was a label at the time. And when all of this was going on, and I started building up my library, I also realized that now we're still talking about the 90s. You're still talking about the 90s. And they are, I remember the Village Voice, I still have the issue. I remember the Village Voice was concerned about online hate and started writing cover stories about online hate and how the internet can be used to advance hate politics. And I was looking at this going, well, they've been doing it for, at this time, about 15, 16 years. And my attitude was, eventually, I came with the idea is, why can't I have my own website too? Why can't I write about these things? This is the way I would say that I had combated this element. And I bring this up to point out something, and what I did with that kind of a resource, because by about 2000 or so, 2000, I would say actually 2001, just almost immediately after 9/11. You know what? I would take that back. I'll reel it back a little bit, because I would say that it was earlier in 2001. I would say it would be about April, because here's how I got regarded as one of those who pioneered the doxing tactic. There was a anti-abortion group, or rather an anti-abortion website that was run by a guy named Neil Horsley, who's no longer with us. He wrote, it was called the Nuremberg Files. And what he did was he published on his website the names and addresses of abortion providers throughout the country. And the reason why it got noticed was because when Bernard Slepian was murdered, just immediately, I mean, pretty much the same day, his name was crossed out on the website, and folks took notice how quickly that happened. And that made it basically a warning call to everybody that, you know, they're watching us. So, you know, you had anti-abortion activists just basically posting people's addresses online, or they were putting them on placards and things like that as they would stand outside abortion clinics, and those abortion providers would sue. But at the time, the courts ruled in favor of the Neil Horsleys of the world because free speech. So my attitude after that was, okay, we can do that to them as well. And that's where doxing on the left kind of began in mass. Now, anti-racist action was also doing it prior to, but they didn't really put names and addresses and such the way One People's Project did in the early days, unless they had them, unless they was able to do so. Once we started doing that, it just took off. We was able to get names, addresses, phone numbers, but most importantly, occupations. And when I say the most importantly, was because when you found out where they worked, and you realized they were teachers, when you realized they were cops, you know, when you realized they were politicians, it made it harder to be any of those things. And that was what was important. And that was one of the reasons why I always told people, look, any and all information and that you can provide to us, we will post, we will use once we are able to confirm said information, by the way. I should clarify that. And it was very important for us to do that in the early days. It was basically, we didn't call it doxing, number one. We basically called it reporting, because that's really what it was. We wasn't looking at it as some sort of a weapon. We basically said, look, we have to give people all the information to go forward in fighting this element. We're basically like fighting with one hand tied behind our back if we do otherwise. So, and people used to get on me about holding things close to my chest whenever I had information. So I said, okay, I'll stop that. And that's where the doxing began. And that's where we are today. And that's why it is considered to be a blessing and a curse for a lot of people, because others can get doxed just as quickly. I think we are a lot more effective with it because we are not trying to uproot society. We're trying to protect it. So that's where we are today. And that's one of the things that I wanted to just put out there so people can understand that you are not helpless. You are not helpless. You not necessarily have to dox people to meet your goals. I mean, yes, it is a questionable tactic. I will accept that. But by the same token, there are things that you can do. You can get the word out a lot more effectively than they can. You are actually the good guys. That's what I would say to the audience right now. You're actually the good guys against this element. People want us to go after this crowd when they can't. So the question is, how do you do it effectively? And at one time, doxing for me was the most effective, and it still is in many respects. But the truth of the matter is, there's other avenues too. Let's explore them.
Wonderful. And again, I will echo, just thank you so much for having me here. And Daryle, it was so wonderful to just hear about your experience with this. And also just sharing that history, which I think is so important to this conversation today. And within my work, you know, what I can say for sure is that for me, this has always felt personal, but it also has felt like a calling. So I knew that from a young age, security was forming. I knew that this was something I was passionate about. And it was over the years, what I also knew was that working with women was something that I wanted to do. Working with technology, working with marginalized individuals, where meaning technology was being used as a weapon against people, and particularly women in minority communities. And so for me, I was really thinking about how could we problem solve this. And over a decade ago, when I started the company PurePoint International, I really wanted to create a platform or a tool that could help with curbing a lot of the well, really basically just help people to feel safer. That was really the bottom line, particularly when they're out in the world. But one of the things that I continued to learn was that it was really hard to do that because it was happening in so many different ways, and to the point um, of a conversation we were having earlier with Kaya is this, the threats come in so many different ways that I felt like I couldn't just create one platform that could solve what it was I was thinking. And so how could I and how could our team best go to individuals and support them where they are? And that is really the foundation of the work that we do today. And it started out by someone coming to us who had a documentary, and she was really concerned about what the backlash would be as the documentary was coming out, what that would mean for the people that were participating in the documentary. And so we worked with her and her team. And then there was another woman, and then there was another person, and there were journalists. And then it just over time, this started to just evolve very naturally. And we started to learn all of the different concerns that were coming up. And we started to develop a method that we felt was a great approach, but also one that was focused and grounded in our values of for us, of what we felt was most important in thinking about how to think about safety and security, but also how to think about what it meant to keep people safe online. So whether they were on social media, whether they were targets of malicious threats, either at home or the workplace, and how we can do that in a way that was holistic. And so it wasn't just for us thinking about it from a digital perspective. It wasn't also just thinking about it from a physical perspective. It was, how do we think about this emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and also, in our environment, all of these different things, and ways that these types of threats and hate can impact us. And so that really started and really evolved our work over time, and that's where we are now. And I was years ago, I think over a decade ago now, Kaya and I initially met. And I was just when I was learning about her story and what she was going through when she was actively in office. I mean, this was, our work was, to me, it was built and catered to be able to support someone just like her. And so the vision also is, how do we, how do we continue to support people like her, and throughout the US, but also across the world, to be able to do what they're called to do in the world. Because of course, sometimes when you're doing what you're called to do, it means your life may have more risk to it. But how can you do it in a way that where you can feel safe, and you can and we can curb the risk and the threat to what happens every single day. And so, and that's the work that I do in the world with our team, and that also is how I got into it. And it's amazing to see how it's even just, I mean, Daryle, I love hearing you talk about 30 years. And, for me, if I just cap it to the last 10 to 12 years, I mean, it's amazing to just see when we used to, go on the internet and start looking for data that was, date of births and all this PII about individuals that were on the internet, and what we could do to eliminate that. And just even in that short period of time, how things have improved to be able to help with removing personal information from online, and just continuing to provide that information to people so that they can feel confident about how they can protect their personal information, but also how they can feel safe as well. So
that's really powerful. Thank you both for sharing that. I mean, it is an important piece to recognize that there have been people who have had a genius around understanding ways to hack our information, to utilize the technology that's there for good or for bad, that's always been a constant tension in our world. And particularly as we have made ourselves more exposed and more vulnerable over time. So this is not brand new. This did not just come up with Twitter or the advent of Facebook. This has been going on for quite some time We're just now feeling it on such a massive global scale.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's super powerful to consider that, and to also not try to feel like overwhelmed by it too.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh no, folks have been engineering this for longer than some folks have been alive. They're watching this particular conversation, but it's been a part of our world, and especially here in the U.S. in particular, where many of these social media giants and these tech firms began. Right. So, okay. So to ground us a little bit more in this conversation, could either of you talk a little bit about your perspective on why the digital sphere in particular is of concern right now? Like, what possible threats do online hate pose to our communities, our democracy, and our nation? And even as we're thinking about online hate, we speak of it also in thinking about what this means around an identity group, but that online hate feeds into cyber terrorism in other ways too, right? That also impact our communities. I'd love to hear your thoughts, either of you if you'd be willing to share around that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to start first. And, it's very different because, just like, decades ago, we would say, well, if you need money, where would you go get the money? Right. And the running joke was at the bank. You would go to the bank. So I think it was John Dillinger that actually said that out of Chicago. I'm going to the bank because that's where the money is. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. There's so much crime that takes place online. And when we think about online hate, that is a crime. And so when people are doing this, they're fueled by multiple different reasons. And we have multiple different reasons why people do the things that they do, whether they're looking just in general when we talk about online crime. And so whether it's because they're looking to make money, or whether it's because they're activists, or whether it's because it's just what they want to do, right? They just want, the world to, to not be a place where people can feel safe. And so they want to be a part of that disruption. And when we think about how that impacts our own democracy, our communities, us as individuals, our country, when people can go online and they can be anonymous and they can say and do whatever they want without consequence, it is what we see is the ugliest side of the human experience. And it can be the easiest thing sometimes for people to do the things that they do. And it can be also, and part of that is part of the reason why it is so challenging. But then when there's misinformation, disinformation out there that fuels the thoughts that people have, where people are kind of going down a rabbit hole, that impacts then in large ways our democracy, how people think about community and how people think about working together, how people even start to rethink our own history in ways that aren't grounded in truth. And it's amazing. And it's amazing because we see this every single day. And there's a willingness for people to believe whatever narrative that they're creating in their mind, as opposed to looking at truth. And it's incredibly scary, and it's so hard at times because when people are doing this and they're doing this under a pseudonym, it's hard to be able to track that. And I think that, to me, that's one of the biggest concerns right now. There's no accountability. And when there's a lack of accountability, people will do in many different ways. They'll do almost anything that they feel that they can get away with. And I think that, for me, that's one of the biggest challenges right now, is how can we create better accountability for people that are online, that are under these names that we can't track back to exactly who we are. And even if we can, and we know that this pseudonym is actually directed, or we know that someone is using that pseudonym, how do we have enough evidence then to be able to bring charges against them? And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, and particularly from a security perspective.
Daryle, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your
And what I was going to say, I apologize for that, but what I would say to that is, it's not just the anonymity. Anonymity is key. I'm glad anonymity is key, because you can be 1,000 different people and it's just you. When you start talking about some of these individuals that I have dealt with in the past, if you hear them chatting amongst each other, they talk about how many Twitter accounts do they have. And they use this to just spread a basically an attack on somebody or a narrative, an untrue narrative that's out there. So you have the ability to not just be anonymous, but to be different, how should I say, entities all at once. And you look like an entire group of people that are concerned about this one thing when it's really just you. Mm-hmm. And to that, you have them get together. All of these individuals will get together in things like 4chan or other social media outlets that they would use to formulate a campaign that will uproot things. Where exactly, for example, did the whole urgency of getting toilet paper during the pandemic begin? Why did that happen? It could have just came out of a prank from one of these little groups of people saying, yo, let's just put this out there and see where it goes. And next thing you know, everybody's taking toilet paper down from the shelves, you know. So, I mean, that's really, in comparison to what they have done, the most benign thing that they have pulled. We've also had Gamergate. We also have Kiwi Farms, which basically exists to just hound the transgender community to the point where somebody kills themselves. That was really a mission for Kiwi Farms. Kiwi Farms is a website that basically a trolling website. And when you consider that's how nefarious things can get, and we talk about the anonymity, that's when, in many respects, what I was talking about, doxing, that's when it's real important to build on your skills to dox individuals that do this particular thing. Like I said, you're not helpless. So that is really the concerns that I have. And to give you an idea of how it can play out, take a look at the fact that the phrase "it's okay to be white" really started out of that. It was a white supremacist trope. It was something that was created in one of these 4chan channels to see how far they can go with this kind of with that kind of mantra or what have you. You put it out there here, put it out there. Just don't change the words. I mean, it was an actual campaign to just make sure, see how many places you can put "it's okay to be white" someplace on the internet. What happens? We have Rasmussen reports doing a poll asking people if it's okay to be white. And then the cartoonist behind Dilbert decides to take the results of that poll and turn it into a call for white people to get away from black people, and now he doesn't have a job anymore. So, I mean, when you have that kind of an impact, now, to be honest with you, no one cares what happens to Scott Adams. So it's kind of like dodging a bullet. Rasmussen was actually trying to promote an idea that woke culture is not popular. But then Scott Adams woke everybody up. So it backfired on Rasmussen. But that was benign compared to what they can do on 4chan or 8chan or whatever these wherever they meet up. And when you consider what they can do on some of these channels and some of these outlets via a cluster of anonymous folks trying to wreak havoc in a community somewhere, when you think about the kind of damage that they can pull, it's definitely something where you have to learn not only how to fight back, but also how to protect yourself as well.
What you just said, Daryle, I would love to follow up on and hear y'all's thoughts briefly about this, because I think this is important. And I know that we have many more questions, and I'm sure Zoe's I got thoughts. And this is meant to be like a conversation too. But one of the things that's always concerned me about the way that the online world works is the ability to mobilize. And what I feel like is happening with many of these hate campaigns, it's very well coordinated and organized. Like there's playbooks. Like this is what you do, this is what you say, this is how you post it. Don't get off message, stay with the script. And it works. And there's both a really insidious piece of the ability to kind of radicalize and mobilize people. But then there's also, I feel like a lot of it is an experiment, as you were saying, as you were both mentioning, like, what happens if we put that out there? Who respond? Do the police get involved? Does anybody start to investigate into it? Does this account get shut down? What's the community outcry? How long is the community outcry? Is it 24 hours? Are they over it in a week? What actually is in place? And it's not around a conspiracy theory, but it's around recognizing that these are straight up tactics that could be used by, you would find this in a military, this seems like it would come out of like the School of the Americas or something, on the level of complexity and the reach that they have in doing this. And I don't know if either of you be willing to talk about this, but I mean, it's something that I feel, especially as you were talking about the Kiwi group, this is a formula, and it is working with pinpoint precision across the country right now. And we're just now waking up to it.
What I think, and actually, I believe Jessica can speak to this a little bit more, so I'm going to be brief on this. I think one of the important things to bear in mind is that you do have a lot of insecure people out there who do nothing but stay online. And that's why one of the reasons why I always point out that the most dangerous 3 letters to this particular crowd is IRL, in real life. Your strength against this particular crowd is offline. Sometimes you have to figure out how you can navigate and build institutions and situations offline so that they're not strong online and people actually know better when they come a calling, so to speak. That's what's always worked for myself. Everybody, I think one of the reasons why they are so strong, or why they have any kind of strength, I should say, is simply because the world has such a reliance on the internet. You don't go to the library when your laptop becomes one. You don't go to try to do research in a courthouse or something like that when everything is put in front of you, and sometimes everything is not. Whatever you need is on the internet. So they bastardize it. So whenever something that you rely on the internet is threatened by this particular crowd, you're in a tailspin. And that's one of the things that we have to overcome. As much as we love the internet, we also have to recognize how dangerous it is. Back in the 90s, I said that by the I said when I first got on the internet that the internet was going to be the 21st century boob tube. It was going to replace television. I have a television in my office right now. I don't know why. So it's because one of the things that's more important than television is how interactive the internet can be. It's a lot more interactive than your regular TV television. I mean, you can watch the news, or you can watch the news and comment on the news at the same time when you're on an internet. So we have to be able to build ourselves, or more to the point, steel ourselves against that kind of element. And the best way to do it is go where they don't go. And that usually is offline and building from there.
And I agree with that. And it's amazing. I mean, we were talking about hate, and we're talking about hate speech. We're talking about all these online threats that are taking place that are coming from a place of fear for a lot of people. They're coming from a place where people don't want to people don't want to see this country continue to change the way it's going to over the next, particularly the next few decades. And particularly that's in regards to the changing representation in this country in terms of diversity. And that brings in a lot of fear. And I think that those extremely, to your point, Kaya, their playbooks, which they have developed, they have perfected, it is because they are so passionate, and it comes from such a deep place for them to be able to get it right. And I think that the question I often ask myself is if there's another perspective of how that can happen, where there can be other playbooks, but coming from a space of truth, coming from a space of love, coming from a space of of the community versus the individual. How can we do that? Also, I wonder how, also on the reverse, how powerful that can be to combat the hate. And I think that when this happens too, when we think about these crimes that are taking place and the lack of investigation that can take place, and to your point, do people campaign around are about this, these things that happen for a 24-hour period? Does it go on for a week? And when this is all happening within technically a private company, when we have these social media platforms that are private companies that are looking at this from a very different perspective, because for them it's about profit in many ways, right? And then versus the fact that these are actually crimes that are taking place, but because in many ways this is still so nascent, it's not like going in and robbing a bank, where those laws have been on the books in communities, counties, municipalities across the country and across the world for hundreds of years. And so when you have a law enforcement community that is trying to still understand how best to, in many cases across the country, what does this mean in terms of criminalization? What does impact mean, particularly when the news or a lot of attention around something does start to die down? How does that coincide with the private space? And I think that that's also part of the tension here. And I think that, of course, it's up to the private companies to have clear rules of engagement for people that are on their platform, and it's important to hold them accountable to that. But I think that tension is really hard, and I think that contributes to this as well. And particularly how we investigate it, how we think about threats, how we see threats, how they think about threats, and how they see it, and how they then turn around and respond and investigate. And so I think that I think how we can, I think that, looking, I think that there can be something interesting that can happen when looking at all the things that they're doing, but what they're doing from a place of hate, how that can be reversed and done from a place of love, and how much that could actually support and also a force of creating safe spaces, that campaign of creating safe spaces versus spaces of hate. And to have clear playbooks around that's part of my ultimate vision of how to drive that in the world, and how to drive that in these kind of tension, in this tension between the public and the private sector, to be able to really create these spaces that are so they're online and they're digital, but they're also physical. And I think, and again, I think part of my learning has been, I want, I work with an organization that has an incredible platform that's a safe platform for women. And I think that's necessary. But I think what I've also learned is you have to go to where people are and be able to be able to support them where they are and create that impact. And I think that's what's absolutely needed. So.
Yeah, thank you both for that. I mean, something that I kind of was hearing in both your answers was kind of the origins almost. Like, some people may mobilize based off fear. It may be like a sense of power that you might not have in your life, in real life, but it's a sense of power, when you're on your computer, a sense of community that you might not have in your life day to day. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, what some of the kind of origins or roots are of the current kind of landscape of digital hate, and kind of along with that, what trends are happening. So like, what trends are we seeing in digital security, and kind of why, what's happening is currently happening.
I think I can speak to the trends. I think I spoke to the history when I first started, but I think why things are happening now. I mean, it was kind of benign before they realized that they can actually get somebody into the White House. I think after Trump was elected, they felt that they can do. I think the world was open to them. Now, let me point this out. Say something right quick. When the Minutemen started organizing against immigrants in 2005, a lot of your white supremacists who were normally in the streets or on the fringes saw themselves in the spotlight all of a sudden in the name of the political mainstream of Republican/conservative politics. So ever since 2005, they have been really trying to maintain that. By the time 2015 comes rolling around, they saw Trump as an opportunity to really take it to the next level. Even if they did not win the 2016 election, they really didn't expect to, you know. And but they really wanted to see if Trump would get in there. I remember when the Conservative Political Action Conference had their conference in February 2015, Richard Spencer had a breakaway conference over at the National Press Club. My people were standing over it as people were coming out, and just videotaping everybody as they came out. And there was a conversation that was going on, and I have this on YouTube actually. There was a conversation going on where one guy just started being real excited about the possibility of Trump being president. Trump didn't announce till June of 2015. So this was the crowd that really pushed him forward. And then when he won in 2016, they was going to make the most of all 4 of those years and possibly 8 if they can get away with it. And they still are, even after he's gone and after we're starting to figure out how to fight back on that. They still are making the most of it. They basically learned how to play the digital game. And do we need to learn how to play it better? Perhaps. But whenever we do get ourselves involved in the digital game, we tend to be a little bit more, how should I say, effective, because ultimately this is a crowd that is not popular, and with the general public, with society, with communities. And when folks who are against them start putting things together, basically that is the community, basically that is society in general. So people are going to gravitate towards what it is we do versus what it is they do. And the reason why I say that is because in addition to the IRL stuff, in addition to the offline things that we need to build, all those institutions, we do have to reclaim some of those areas, and Jessica spoke to this, some of those areas that we ourselves control. Elon Musk buys Twitter, make a mirror version of Twitter and start building there, because people will gravitate towards that. People will go towards that. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, those are 3rd generation social media outlets. There was MySpace, there was Twitter. I mean, we will flock towards what supports us. So all we have to do is just build it. People always worry about getting thrown off of Twitter now that Elon Musk runs it. I'm still on Twitter, but my attitude is I also have 2 websites. If something happens to me on Twitter, you're still going to hear from me. So you're still going to hear from our people. It's going, and we have tons of websites and tons of outlets online that we just need to amplify. That's what's going to have to matter. And again, we can build our own social networks. That's what Mastodon is. But we need to have something similar to what, Twitter is. That's what the right did when they thought that they was getting bounced off of Twitter all the time. They started Parler, they started Gab, they started Truth Social, So our attitude, we have to come with that same attitude if we're going to be online. And we're going to have a heck of a lot, and we will, I should say, have a heck of a lot more control over these knuckleheads than Twitter or Facebook seem to have.
Great. And I thought you did a beautiful job also going into history there, Daryle, even though you covered a lot at the beginning. So that was all wonderful. What I'll share just from a trend standpoint as well, just adding on to that is, I think we're going to continue to see, when we think about trends in this area, I think we're going to continue to see what we've been seeing, a lot of doxing, a lot of the attack, just like specific targeted attacks on people online. And I think this will continue because A, it's been working, and B, people have been able to continue to get away with it, right? Because again, there isn't that accountability of that's really causing someone to stop. But I think when we think about ChatGPT, when we think about all of these other AI tools and that are coming out and apps, I think for the most part, many of us are familiar with deep fakes, right? Where someone's image, their likeness, so the image of what they physically look like and their voice can be manipulated in a way that can make it seem like they're doing or saying something that they're not. And I think that these tools, again, technology can be used for good or technology can be used in a negative way. And I think, many of people are looking at these AI technologies going, hey, how can I have them further my vision or mission that I'm doing in my life, or support my family, or support my organization, or support my business, or whatever that happens to be. But I think there are a lot of people that are looking at this from a very negative perspective, or how can I use this to hurt this person, attack this person? And I think that that's going to be something that's going to be really important. So part of that then also that goes back to, well, what information actually is about out on the internet about us? What images or videos are we putting out there about our own likeness that someone could take and manipulate? And the truth of the matter is, we're not going to run away. We're not going to shy away from being our true selves and being out and sharing and speaking what's most important for us. But just having this in our minds is something that's really important for us to think about, because what we know is that they're willing to go and do whatever it is that they need to do. And this would definitely fit into that space. So.
I forgot about ChatGPT. I forgot about AI. That's another concern, really. I actually signed on to ChatGPT because I wanted to see what I can do with it on another level. I mean, I'm not trying to do something shady, obviously, but someone will. Mm-hmm. And I noticed as I'm experimenting with it, that they notice it too. The folks at ChatGPT are trying to basically protect themselves from anyone that tries to plug in something, and they'll put a message up there saying, yeah, we don't know if we can do this because it may generate some sort of negativity or whatever. So but as things go, that whomever wants to use ChatGPT for such things, there's ways around it. There's ways to get it done. So yeah, it's just something to look out for, especially the deep fakes. I can't believe just how good they are sometimes. And it's just going to be a case of, we are going to learn how to be vigilant against that. So, because we have to, we just simply have to.
This brings a really great question that I think could be really helpful for us. I mean, because we're talking about deep fakes and we think about this in the world of like, oh, it's something for someone else. But I, personally have a friend who was like an elementary school teacher, not even a public figure. And there was deep fake videos made for the purposes of trying to scam people for money, right? Mm-hmm. Of her saying, no, this is real. Absolutely. You should do this. Sign up. I was like, that's not her. But it looked just like her and it was all done. So recognizing that these are technologies that are being used, and it's not just in the deep fake world. We're worried about what's happening with our phones. People are like, you can put it on airplane mode all you want. You can shut off your phone all you want. It's still hackable. It's still all of these things. So we feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the technology in ways that might keep us from engaging in digital security and thinking about those kinds of steps. Can you all share with us some practical steps or practical tools that we might use, things that we probably haven't even considered around how we think about our home security, our internet safety, our phones, our kids, those sorts of things that could be helpful for us to use to make ourselves at least some measure of more safe than what we currently are right now while we do nothing or just wring our hands.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'll just start with saying is that, we're at a point, and we've been at this point for a while, and I feel like I talk about this a lot, but I do think it's important to bring this up here, is that what we're talking about here, when we talk about what we can do and what tools that we can use to help keep us safer, part of this is about an ongoing mindset that we have to understand that we want to live the best life that we can live. We want to be safe. We want to feel safe, but we also need to know that there are threats out there. There are threats out there that we haven't even conceived of yet, right? That someone is working on, that someone is doing, that someone is targeting towards us. And so how can we comfort ourselves, our children, our significant other, our friends, our coworkers, knowing that this is the case? And it means that it requires a mindset change. And so it means the way that we engage, to your point, Kaya, with our phones, our laptops, the way that we engage even when we're going to go out and take a walk, if we're going and staying in an Airbnb, all of these little things, like questioning when people are asking for certain information that it doesn't really make sense that they need, questioning when someone is like, oh, your credit card didn't go through. Can I swipe that again? Or it's like, oh, and they want to hold it. Why do you need to hold my credit card? Why do you need to swipe it again? All of these little things, like changing that mindset. And so, in thinking about this, I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is to really make sure that, there's a tool called Delete Me. I don't know if many of you have heard of it, but it's a tool that can help you with wiping information about yourselves online. And so I think that something like that can be helpful in thinking about the amount of information that we have, again, that we may not even realize that we have online, that can start to lessen that footprint. The other thing that I can say that I'm seeing a lot of, and I feel like last year in 2022 saw so much more of even than the previous years, and this is with teenagers, so parents having to deal with this with teenagers, as well as people that have high visibility on social media that they've had to deal with, or the account takeovers. So people coming in, getting access to accounts and taking over the accounts. And either way, it doesn't matter how old you are or what you're doing, it impacts you in so many different ways. And so, having strong security and privacy controls on all of your accounts, social media, your healthcare accounts, your children's accounts at school, or whatever that may look like within a school setting. Thinking about all of that, I think, is really important to do, because people, the thing about security is that we can do a lot of what we can to protect ourselves. But the truth of the matter is, if someone is patient enough and someone is focused on you enough, they will find a way. And that's why having layers of security is so important. By you yourself being patient is so important. By having this impact every area of your life is really important. And that's why it's a mindset change. So I would say even just those couple of things I think would be important. The mindset, the Delete Me tool for social media, and then really being mindful of all the accounts you have, because it's incredible the amount of takeovers that I saw just in 2022 alone. And so I can imagine that's only going to increase in 2023.
And I just mentioned that I was still on Twitter and we have to build our own meetings. But I would also say, in particular, if you're on Twitter, you may want to start working on phasing yourself off Twitter. I'm on Twitter because I'm looking for neo-Nazis, because they're flocking back, of course. I'm looking for information. But the less information I have about myself on Twitter, the better. And that's always been the case, but now more so. Because when you see the current controller of Twitter just basically dismantling all the security measures that have been put in place at Twitter, then you have to start wondering, well, what of yours is in jeopardy? Case in point, he is now making it so that two-factor authentication is only for paid accounts. He's allowing people to have a blue check simply because if they pay $8 a month, which was stupid, because basically the reason why you have a blue check next to me, the reason why I have a blue check next to my name, because I want people to know for sure that it is me that they are talking to, you know. So you got to start recognizing when a social media outlet is less secure and whether or not you want to stay on that platform. And I would also say to that point, we talk about, yes, make sure that wherever you are on social media, make sure, as Jessica said, make sure that your security is top notch. Make sure that everything is secure. Change your passwords often. But I would also add this, because this is what I do. I also make sure that I know how to reach people when they are not in one area besides social media. My friends, my closest friends, or even not even my closest friends, people that I haven't spoken to in a while. Like I just had recently, a friend of mine hit me up on Facebook and asking for money. Now, how many times have and you can see whenever they're writing that it looks strange, that it's not their normal way of talking. Most importantly, they haven't spoken to you in a while, so why are they hitting you up for money? They haven't spoken to you in 10 years, but they're asking you for money. So luckily, this person also has a LinkedIn account. So I called them up. So I just hit them up on LinkedIn and says, did you get hacked on Facebook? And they did. You also have to be mindful of accounts that are made as a mirror to somebody that you probably do frequent deal with, because you could have friended up with somebody who you thought you was already friends with, the next thing you know, they're asking you for money. I'm just using money as a just as a random example right now, but all you have to do is just check and see if you have two of the same person there, and hit up the one that has the longest tenure and ask, is this your account or something like that. Facebook knows how to take down those kinds of accounts. I also have my another friend of mine was hitting me up. He doesn't have a LinkedIn. He doesn't have another account on Twitter or something like that. So I had to call him, not answering his phone. So I told him, I am not speaking to you on this platform until you call me. I think it was so funny because one time because he's still getting hit right now. And I remember I was he was asking me for money, and I recognized that it was a scam. And so I got hit with somebody doing, how you doing, hello, or all of that. I mean, just to see how to see if I respond. So the guy, this was back on February 4th. He says, hello. And I say, hey, I'm concerned your page got hacked, so I will stop responding if something about a program comes up. And what I meant by that is they usually ask you, have you gotten your money from this government program that they just started for everybody? And you go and you end up getting money snatched up that way. So I told him, I will stop responding if something about a program comes up. And the person responded, you good. And then and that was the end of the conversation. It is a case of being vigilant. Ultimately, it is a case of being vigilant. And sometimes you have to be vigilant for others as well, because not everybody's going to be as computer savvy as you. So it's always going to be a case of being mindful of who it is you're talking to, what it is you're talking to, and how you are going to respond and how you're going to navigate those waters. It takes common sense ultimately. And that's the only thing I could say about that in the
end. Yeah. Thank you both so much. And I was just thinking, I mean, recently in Vermont, one of our main news outlets got hacked on Twitter yesterday and was posting kind of nonsense. And like, I don't know, it happens all the time. Luckily, nothing bad happened, but it's a news outlet on Twitter. I mean, the power they hold is a lot. And I don't know, yeah, just thinking about Twitter scares me right now. But before we close out tonight, we'd love it if each of you would give an opportunity to tell everyone listening in where they can learn more about your work, maybe follow you, access resources that can help them disrupt hate and staying safe. So if both of you would like to kind of plug your own work and some resources, that would be fantastic.
Well, you can definitely reach One People's Project at onepeoplesproject.com. Reach us at our newsline, idavox.com, which is named after Ida B. Wells. We're on Facebook, and there'll be links. You can find One People's Project on Facebook. You can find idavox on Facebook. You can find One People's Project at One People's PROJ, idavox at idavox OPP. You can find us on Instagram. You can find idavox and One People's Project on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Daryle Lamont Jenkins, and on TikTok, whenever I'm on it, as Notorious DLJ. I was being weird there. And that's it. I'm all over the internet. And of course, you can also find me. I also have some documentaries that I have. One that everybody is most familiar with is one called Alt-Right Age of Rage. You have to, I mean, it's easily found online, but I can't say for sure where exactly it is. It used to be on Netflix. It's not there anymore. And then there was also the movie Skin, which was about a neo-Nazi that I helped get out of the white power scene. He's played by Jamie Bell, and Mike Coulter, who best known for playing Luke Cage, plays me. And you can find that on Amazon Prime. And that's it in a nutshell. I'm everywhere. I even won an Oscar.
Wow.
You can find PurePoint International on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as Instagram. And our Twitter handle is PURINTL. And then you can also find us at our website, which is https://the-purepoint.com. Then my name is Jessica Robinson. You can also find me on all of those platforms, and on Twitter and Instagram, it is JessRobin96. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you. And we'll be putting that in the chat of the live as well for people, so you can click the links. And once again, we just want to thank both of you for this really powerful and thought-provoking discussion. I'm sure we could have continued for several more hours. And thank you everyone who is watching for tuning in. And please feel free to follow Rights and Democracy Institute. You can stay updated with our work on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. We also have a petition to stop digital hate, specifically digital misogyny, which Kaya mentioned at the top. And our communications team is also going to be adding the links to that as well in the Facebook chat. You can also donate to the Rights and Democracy Institute to keep our work strong and well-resourced, specifically in the realm of digital security. And just again, huge thank you to both Jessica and Daryle for your amazing conversations tonight, and for all the work you're doing outside of this, 1 hour little event. So thank you both so much. And with that, we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Night all.